Guys, hope you guys can see me. But look darker, is just me. Hey guys, can you let me know if you're seeing me clearly? Cause I think I look dark, but I'm not sure. Sorry for the late start, guys. I was having internet problems. Hi, Susie. Hi, Suzanne. I was having internet problems, but I think it's resolved. Howdy, seeing you clearly. Okay, great. Thank you. Hey, guys. I'm eating tambourine balls. Oh, you're fine. Thank you, darling. Hey, guys. What's going on? Okay, so I have a really great conversation lined up for you guys today with somebody who I think is very knowledgeable in this particular area. His name is Paul, and Paul is, I don't know if he likes the word guru, but let's just say he's very good at what he does, and most of it is training. So he trains people who want to start a podcast. He's going to explain a lot clearer than I can about exactly what it is that he does. But I wanted to have this conversation because my podcast, the Digital Jamaica podcast, has really helped push the Digital Jamaica brand, and more than anything else has really helped with exposure, especially outside of Jamaica. I remember the first time I went anywhere and I said, "Oh, I'm the creator of the Digital Jamaica podcast," and people go, "Oh, I know that podcast." I was like, really? So people will know your work or your content before they even really know you. So I think the podcast really helped a lot, and that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. How you can use your podcast. Let me pin the title. How podcasting how to use. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it at that. So title pinned. Yay! So everybody who comes in now knows exactly what we're talking about. Paul, when you're ready, you can send the join request. Hi, Alexandra. Mrs. Stennett is in the house as well. Right. So definitely wanted to have the conversation. Back in February, I was asked Kingston Creative to actually do a presentation on how Jamaicans can use podcasting to earn, and that kind of put the idea in my head. Hi, Paul.
Hey, what's up? Let me know if you can hear me okay.
You're breaking up a little bit. Say something again.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You can? Okay.
Can you go a little bit higher in terms of your volume?
I guess I could speak louder as far as as far as I can go with that.
Guys, could you just let me know if you're hearing Paul?
Yeah.
Could somebody in the chat tell me? Okay.
I'm hearing you okay.
Okay, you're hearing me okay. Okay, great. Yeah. Hi again, Paul.
Hello.
Thanks for talking to me. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, I'm honored to be on and
all right.
share what I know.
Okay, awesome. So Paul, I was just explaining to them, hi, come on. I was just explaining to them that earlier in February of this year, I was actually at the I think it was called the Creative Summit. It was a career day that was put on by Kingston Creative and Heart at the Institute of Jamaica. And they asked me to make a presentation. Okay, somebody says both are okay. Okay, great. So they asked me to make a presentation on podcasting and how Jamaicans can actually make money from podcasting. So I remember when I remember telling you, yes, I have one lipstick for you guys. I'm trying. I'm really trying. I'm upping the production quality. So I remember Paul telling you that I had actually mentioned you in my presentation as somebody who actually does earn money from Jamaica, helping people put on podcasts. But then I'm hoping that you can better explain exactly how you do it. You don't have to tell us all your trade secrets, but just give us the basics. And I know you just finished the Successify challenge. Um, so we want to talk to you about that, guys. If you missed it, you missed a whole lot. So Paul, when you're ready, you can introduce yourself and we can get the conversation going.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So, hey, Katie, everybody. Paul here. And I do two things. So I started my business in 2018, officially in 2018. Just see if I can.
Can't hear you now.
Yeah, so I started my business in 2018, and I do two things mainly. So on one side, I help clients to get their shows produced, in terms of what it relates to editing their shows, writing their show notes, doing the social media. All my clients on that side do is send me their audio, and I take care of the rest. On the other side, which I spend a lot of time doing nowadays, is on coaching and training people on how to make their podcast successful, whether it is to launch successfully or to convert their podcast from being something that's helped them to grow a brand to help them to grow their business directly. Like by connecting them with clients who are willing to work with them and want to work with them, excited to work with them. So those two things.
So you're a podcast coach on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you produce podcasts.
Yeah, that's
on
what.
the other
Yeah,
hand.
my team produces podcasts. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, awesome. How did you get into that, Paul? Because I know you have a very interesting story.
Yeah.
So if you could share that with us.
Okay. Yeah. So I started my own podcast in 2017. Yeah, about
Right.
August 2017. And that was I was 1 year or so already into a role where I was doing sales, regional sales for a software company. And
Okay.
so that involved going out, meeting entrepreneurs, meeting executives, getting to know them, seeing where there could be a fit, a synergy between the software that we provide and obviously these companies, and then making a connection. And through that time, I was meeting some really interesting people, and so I thought it would be really good if the conversations that we're having, like we're just sitting down, maybe over drinks or just like really kicking back and talking, if we have a microphone
Right.
there and other people can benefit from that. So I started the podcast with that frame in mind. No idea about monetizing it or anything. I just wanted to get the information out there, and it grew. It grew really, really big, and to a point where I was being asked, just like this experience you had, where I was being asked to be on panels. I was in rooms and people already knew who I was when I got into that room because they heard the podcast. All those great things.
Right.
And in late 2017, I exited. I exited the company. I was laid off from the company that I was in, and so I had to figure out, okay, what can I do now? Because I still had the podcast, but it wasn't generating any money, and so I had no money coming in because I didn't have a job anymore. And so I had to, what can I do to transition? What can I do to make something happen? And instead of like saying, all right, send my resume in and find another job, I thought maybe I should give this business thing a shot, because I've always talked about business. My podcast was about entrepreneurship. Let me try to be an entrepreneur. And I worked through for months because I lost my job in the end of 2017. And it wasn't until May 2018 that I was able to get clients who wanted to pay me. Because I remember the first client that I got.
And pay good money, by the way.
Well, yeah, that was good. But before, like, I remember the first client that paid me money. This was a proof of concept for me, because I wanted to say, if I can make $1 online, then I can multiply that up to thousands, 10,000, millions. Right, great.
Right.
And so
It says like you can make $1, you can make $1,000.
yeah, right. And the first client that paid me was this guy in Canada. He was an actor, and he gave me $20 for each podcast show notes that I wrote. It was really ridiculous amount of money, and the work that I did was like it was insane. But I was so happy to do it because it was money. It was money that would just prove the concept that I can be in Jamaica and I can make money from somebody in Canada who I did not know from before anything. He just looked at my profile, saw that I was legit, and they said, okay, let's do a test run. That snowballed into me getting more confidence, me getting more opportunity, going on and getting more opportunities until in May officially, my first set of high paying clients came in, and it's just been like that since that time.
Mm-hmm. So now you are a full-fledged coach and producer, and you are actually making a living wage, or you're actually earning enough money to live on just from doing that. And so where are most of your clients from?
Most of my clients are in the States, but I have clients in Canada, I have clients in UK, I have clients in Australia as well.
In Australia, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have clients all over the world, pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. So how then how were you able to multiply your brand? Because you have a company called Amazing Games, right?
Yes.
So how were you able to use your podcast and your knowledge of podcast production? Because guys, I can tell you, it is not the easiest thing to produce a podcast. There's a lot of moving parts, and you literally have to create a system to go from booking a guest to the finished product. There are several moving parts in between there, right?
Yeah.
So you have to actually create your own system. But how did you use that knowledge to actually get you more clients? How did you move from one client to however many clients that you actually have now? And how are you able to sustain that? And what does that mean for your brand overall?
Yeah. Was the biggest thing. So when I started off and I got my first clients and stuff, I was doing everything. So like between January and like May, I was heavily involved in just sliding in people's DMs and being like, hey, do a show, I'll edit a show for you for free, just to show you what I can do. And if you love that, I will, we can work together on a long-term basis. And that got me 0 clients. Most people who came in just said, so other people came in, said, you know what, I'm good, no thanks. Other people came in, said, you know what, I'm gonna give you my episode. They give me the episode, I do a good job, they take it back and they be like, thanks for my episode, you did it for free, goodbye. So nobody came in that way. One way that was very helpful for me, which I'm doing right now, was to build my brand. Meaning, do I have a very accessible, clear Instagram profile? Do I have content out there that gets people knowledgeable about me, what I do, who I am as a person? And so the biggest break for me was I got a chance to be on somebody's webinar. They had a hot seat thing going on. I got on, I asked a question, and the question was specifically a question about my Instagram. I want to know, like, how can I leverage my Instagram to get more clients, basically. And so they sat down on the Instagram, on my profile, and they were scrolling through, trying to give me advice. And so thousands and thousands of people on that webinar saw all the awesomeness that was my profile at the time, and heard my story. And people reached out and said, I love your story. And to this day, that's probably still one of the biggest ways that people find me. Other than that way, which is building brand, which is huge, is referrals. So people who I've done work for, love what I do, to a friend, or just talk openly in groups about, hey, if you want your podcast done, talk to Paul, and that's I get clients that way as well. So okay. Building brand. And referrals.
So, but the referrals come from the fact that you do have a solid brand, and you already have you are already building that brand, and the more work you do and the more people like your work is the more that added to your brand reputation.
Yeah.
because brand reputation is a very important thing, guys, when you're trying to build your brand, especially as a digital brand, right? You don't have like a physical space that people can necessarily go to. So the name of his company again, it's called Amazing Gains.
Amazing Gains.
Amazing Gains. Paul, can you just drop your Instagram handle in the chat?
Okay, let me do that.
So people can see. Right. So, Paul, talk to us now about how we can use a podcast, or why you think we need as a brand, especially as a personal brand, you need a podcast, and then how can a podcast help you boost your brand?
Yeah. A podcast is one of the best touch points that you can have for your business, especially if you're a personal brand. Well, even if you're a conglomerate, people like to do business with people. And so if there's one person that's behind that brand, and you can get to know them more, get to know them on a deeper level through a podcast, you're well on your way to having great customers. And so your podcast is, I think of your podcast as something like a middle of the funnel. And you have 3 tiers. You have the top of funnel, where people come in, they don't really know you, but they see something that pulls them in. They're kind of interested. Middle of the funnel is where you deepen the relationship with the person. You get them to know you better, get them to kind of like you, relate to you, be interested in your products and services. And then finally, bottom of funnel is where people take action to buying from you, whether it's your course or your coaching or your products, anything like that. So I see podcasts in the middle there, because it's able to get people from being, they don't really know who you are, so they can be really interested, really warmed up, really hot and excited, because they're able to see you in a different light. They're able to hear you and the depth of your expertise. There's so many benefits to having a podcast.
Right, and one of the benefits too is exposure. This week I was minding my business and I got a DM from someone who says, "Hey, I just Googled Jamaican podcasts and your podcast popped up." One, that tells me that my SEO is working. And guys, podcast really adds to your SEO ranking as well, right, Paul?
Yeah, yes, definitely.
Especially if, like me, you actually have your podcast on your website.
Exactly.
So what I did was I created a web page on my website, thedigitalJamaica.com, and I actually upload episodes to the page, so you can actually listen on the page. So you don't necessarily have to have a podcast player. Mm-hmm. Although if you have an iPhone, it automatically comes with the podcast player as an app. But you can actually listen to the podcast on my website. So it adds to the SEO value of your website too, especially say somebody is looking for, like this person was actually looking for a Jamaican podcast that she can get into. She's a 3rd generation Jamaican. She's not born here, but her parents were Jamaican. She was born in Canada. She grew up there. And she actually wanted to reach out to have a conversation with somebody in Jamaica to find out what is actually happening, in Jamaica, in the scene, blah, blah, blah. And my podcast actually popped up. So in that way, it gets you exposure to a wider audience too. And then the content that you actually created for the podcast actually stays out there. It stays on the podcast player.
Yep.
So sometimes months, even years after you've produced this piece of content, people are still finding it. People are still engaging with it. And it's almost as if you're automating your brand building process by actually making podcast content and putting it out there. And if you do it right, which Paul is going to tell us what is the right way as opposed to the wrong way of doing it. If you do it right, your content remains fresh. It remains, so even if it's a conversation you had 2 years ago, the content remains fresh enough where people 2 years later, 5 years later, even 10 years later can still relate to it and still relate to you and find your brand as well.
Yeah.
But as I said, there's a right way of podcasting. And I know you always talking about building the podcast before you actually launch, actually having an audience for your podcast before you actually even launch your podcast. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, just to touch on,
how do you have an audience?
Yeah, just to touch on something that you mentioned earlier, which I totally agree with. Definitely have your podcast up on the website. You kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Like instead of, you don't if you don't have the time to write a blog or be Jessica in the kitchen and have a very awesome blog, you can still get the benefits of an awesome
Right?
blog by having your podcast on your blog. So one, you can build a good podcast by having a podcast, but then take the audio, turn it into show notes, and put it in your blog as well. Take your two birds with one stone. So I think that's really great advice, Kadia. Also, so you asked about building an audience for your podcast before you launch. I think this is crucial. This is something that I didn't do well when I launched my podcast, and so it was a journey to build the momentum after the podcast was launched. But
Right.
you have a much faster momentum, a much stronger momentum if you have an audience who's already excited and waiting for your podcast before it goes live. So
Right.
I usually tell people take 6 weeks to 8 weeks to kind of plan this launch out, and then get people on board at least 4 to 6 weeks before you actually before you launch, and get them excited. Tell them what's coming,
Right.
what's in it for them, how they can support you. Really, 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 this is the time when you want to cash all your chips with everybody you know to get them on board to help you to launch, because that's going to give you the biggest momentum that you can have. Because your podcast grows when people share with people. It's a very personal relationship. This whole podcasting thing is. So if you can tap into that for people, get people excited, get people sharing with you, when your podcast launches, you'll have a much stronger time, a much better time in reaching all the people that you want it to reach.
Yeah. And you are talking about growing the podcast, and having people share the podcast. It's literally building the momentum and sharing the momentum. So there's different trains of thoughts as it relates to how to actually boost your podcast, because with podcasting, guys, the more subscribers you have, the more downloads you have, the bigger your podcast can grow, and then the easier it is for you to monetize the podcast, because then now you can, advertisers will come in to say, hey, you have a particular audience size, or you have a command of a particular demographic of people that we are interested in getting our product or services in front of, and we will actually pay you. So in that way, it's not really that different from a radio broadcast. I mean, there's the differences are in terms of distribution and platform and stuff like that, but there's not much difference. Just like how you would have a radio show, and then you have a break and you have a commercial sponsor. It's literally why is this thing active? It's literally the same kind of thing, right? So the more you can get people, the more audience you can actually build around your podcast, is the easier it is going to be at the end for you to monetize. And of course, along all the way, you're still building your brand, especially as it relates to your brand authority, Paul, because if you have an expertise in a particular area and you're exercising that expertise every time that a podcast episode comes out, is you exercising your expertise in some way, shape, or form. As Paul said, it kind of deepens the relationship between you and the person who is listening, and it also deepens their sense of, yeah, this person know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So it's actually reassuring them every time they're listening to you. It's actually reassuring them that, one, this person knows what they're talking about. Two, this person, am I glitching?
You're glitching a little bit, yeah. Am I okay? Maybe it's me. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I think something's happening with the internet, because it was giving me grief before I came on. Right. So, what was I talking about? Right. Deepening that brand authority. And also it helps with brand recognition, because a lot of podcasters, you have a lot of podcasters who are actually big names now off of podcasting, like Pat Flynn and Joe Rogan, and the huge podcasters who actually use a podcasting platform. Because Pat Flynn wasn't necessarily popular before. Joe Rogan was a comedian, but Pat Flynn and people like him, they weren't necessarily popular before, but it's through the podcasting.
Yep.
And the community and the audience that they were able to build up, it kind of really boosts their brand.
Yep.
Now, once you mention podcasting, there's certain names that are akin to that. So once you mention podcasting, there's Pat Flynn and others like him. So it's definitely really good at building your brand, but you have to be able to connect with people. In the Successify workshop, and I want to talk to you about that now, you are talking about crafting your message in a particular way. right? And I know you gave us some steps. So you mind just quickly going over that so people can
Yeah.
actually understand that it's not just set up a podcast and go talk. There's just as how you would build your brand in different ways, and you have your goals and objectives, and you have your brand
Hmm.
messaging and your tone and blah, blah. That applies to your podcast as well. But there's a particular way of doing it, right?
Yes, definitely. So,
So
um,
tell us about Certify first, and then you can go into that.
yeah. So basically, you don't they don't want to start anything, whether it's a podcast, Instagram profile, anything, without having a plan for how you're gonna go towards it, right? And so, what we talk about or we spoke about in the challenge was setting up your flag planting statement, and that's something
Flat.
where you're telling the world exactly who you are, who you're here to serve, and how you can help them with their specific problem. And you kind of have to be really specific about who you're here to serve, because if you try to talk to everybody, you're speaking to nobody, right? So really have a specific niche. And I find a lot of podcasters who kind of jump in and be like, I want to have a podcast, I'm having a podcast and talk about all these things. They struggle to get a market fit. They struggle to resonate with anybody because they're talking about so many things. If you're talking about how to start a business, and you're talking about how to get your first million, and you're talking about, like, you're talking to different people at different levels, and no one's going to really have any resonance with you at that point. So identifying
Right.
who exactly it is you're here to serve, and what it is you're going to help them with. Are you going to take them from having an idea to starting their first business? Are you going to take them from having started their business to getting their first million, their first client? Like, what is the specific goal in mind? Because that specific person, there are people who are looking for that journey, that their own customer journey. And you having a podcast about that will get people instantly hooked, and then instantly they look to you as the authority, because no one else is talking to them about their specific journey, where they specifically are in their problems and where they want to get to in their goals. So that's the first.
Right. So how do you actually go about crafting that flag planting statement?
Yeah, so there's a formula that we use, simple formula. It is, I help blank, and that is blank could be who's a specific sub target of the market that you are helping with your anything, with
Right.
or moving from, or whatever that
Yeah.
is, point A to point B. Point A is what I
Right.
call your purgatory, which is like this is the hell, or the pain that your perfect listener or your client is going to be in, and you want to move
Right.
from that purgatory to this paradise. What is this aspirational thing? So, give you an example. So for mine, I've chosen, I help podcasters move from having a failing podcast to having a functioning six-figure podcast funnel, right? So it's a very clear
Right.
to people. If you're a podcaster, you know, and you're struggling, you know that it feels to you like you are failing at it. And you can, you're aspiring to have a podcast that's going to help your business to grow, not only to grow, but to grow exponentially, to grow really well from your podcast. And so I help them in that path. When they hear that, they're very clued in to exactly what I'm about, what I'm doing. So that's a formula.
Okay. So it's actually from the outset, people need to be extremely clear. And you see, guys, again, this is almost branding 101. From the outset, your message need to clearly relate to the person who it is intended for, because that is why you're niching with every single thing, guys. It's about niching. And you do have variety podcasts, right? But variety podcasts, I find that the people who produce variety podcasts tend to be bigger podcasters, or podcasts that are not like brand personal brand podcasts, but like a NPR, or
Yeah.
like with like a company or a studio actually behind it, that they have the different personalities who do the different shows that can actually carry it, right? But for you alone to sit there and have a variety podcast, unless it's on like a general thing, and even that can get a little bit muddy. But um, the clearer you are as to what exactly it is that you're talking about, and the truth too, Paul, is that makes it easier for your audience to find you,
Yes.
because then if they are looking for a Harry Potter podcast, and there is a huge Harry Potter podcast, my time. So if I'm looking for a Harry Potter podcast, because the same keyword searching that you would do in Google when you're looking for something is the same keyword search you would do in the podcast player search thing to find podcasts. So if you're on your podcast player, you feel like listening to a podcast about jazz or about herbs or whatever, you literally type in herbs, and that's all you will need to type in, and then you see all the podcasts about herbs come up. But in that little description box there where you explain what your podcast is
Mm-hmm.
about, that's the clincher right there. Because as clear as you can be in that little description box right there is how your weird and awesome people, if it is that you have a weird and awesome
Yeah.
podcast, can actually find and connect with you, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the flag planting statement actually comes into effect.
Yeah.
So you're not just creating it and putting it down, you're creating a statement and you're putting that statement, you're literally putting that statement out there in terms of your podcast description, but that statement also plays into the content, right?
Mm-hmm.
So each piece of content that you're putting out should go back to what your original objective is, and that should all be wrapped up in your flag planting statement. That's a part of your objectives,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And there's definitely room to expand. Like once you are a known entity, once you don't need to rely on like having a specific niche for people to identify, people to find you. Like what, like for example, Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan, like you mentioned, all these people, they can do variety. They can talk about
Yeah,
anything
they can get
because
anything. Yeah,
they don't need to come in under a niche anymore. They're so established that you know Tim Ferriss, and so you love Tim Ferriss. So anything Tim Ferriss does, you're listening to it. So at that
they
point,
have super
fine.
fans. They have millions of super fans.
Yeah. So when everybody comes to me and they say to me, "Well, Tim Ferriss does that," I said, "Well, Tim Ferriss can do it because that's Tim Ferriss. Beyonce can be Beyonce because she's Beyonce. Don't try to be Beyonce until before you get to that level." So yeah, I let people know that. Start where you
And
are, focusing on your niche, and then grow that all over time.
right. And the thing is too, when people come and they say, "Oh well, somebody else is already doing that," my thing is, so I mean, you will find several podcasters within the same niche. The ones who will get the most share of the pie are the ones who become better at putting their message across or getting their message out and building their audience. But none of this started out that way, and that's what we need to understand. Right. So they didn't start out as a big podcaster. It took time to grow because podcasting globally is still relatively new.
Yeah.
It's a relatively new medium, especially in the Caribbean. It is like, oh my God, podcast. It's still kind of it's new globally,
Mm-hmm.
but it's especially new here in a very small and very particular kind of market as well.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna, if as a Caribbean person, you have to understand too that your audience may not even be local, because a majority of my audience is not local. A majority of my audience is actually US and Canada. And Jamaica is actually, so US and Canada kind of equal, and Jamaica is like my second biggest audience. So you'll find that because a lot of Jamaicans don't know about podcasting or don't really listen to podcasts, because it's an audio based kind of thing, so you don't really listen to podcasts. You'll find that the people who listen to your podcast are people from very far flung places that you never even would have thought you could be able to connect with. And that's another reason why it's such a powerful brand building tool, because it connects you to so many people all across the world.
Yeah.
And you get people get in touch with you, you're going, where are you from? That's a place?
Yeah.
Okay. And they're listening to your podcast and they're relating to your podcast.
Yeah. And like,
And that's the powerful thing.
never you tell yourself that there are other people doing it, doing what you want to
Yeah.
do, so you can't do it. Listen, no one else has your perspective on how you see the world. No one else has your
Exactly.
ideas. Like when I started my podcast, there were other people doing entrepreneur-based podcasts in Jamaica. But I knew that there's something that I wanted to do, and I can bring everything that I have to it. I created ideas, I revolutionized, I did all of that stuff, and I was able to stand out. And don't think that because someone is doing it, you can't do it as well. You definitely can. There are people
Exactly.
who want to hear your perspective, or those don't want something from listening to 2 podcasts, 3 podcasts, and the more you focus on expressing yourself, your true self out there, you're going to resonate. You're going to stand
Right.
out. You're going to shine. Your perspective is important.
But Paul, can you talk about consistency though? Because I think that's one thing that really adds to your brand building reputation. Because, and I said to people all the time, once you create an expectation, it is kind of hard for you to get away from it. So once you start a podcast and you put that podcast out there and people starting to actually listen to the podcast and they're starting to like it and you're building expectations, you have to follow through on those expectations. You can't just leave it, because what I find is that local podcasters, and I'm not guilty of this, we're not very consistent in how we put out our podcast episode. So you'll have one podcast episode here, and then 2 months later you have another one, and then 2 months later or a year later you have another one. So talk to us about the importance of consistency in terms of engaging your audience and growing your audience.
Yeah, consistency is a huge driver of momentum. Like we've experimented with almost every format. We've experimented with monthly podcast. We've experimented with two times a month podcast, weekly, more than once a week. Definitely at least weekly, right? Is good for momentum. And like you'll rapidly start to drop off on your listenership once you go beyond weekly. Like I've seen it, it's a tragedy. It's not something you like to see. It's really bad. The other thing about that people have come to me about, which is about seasons. I'm gonna do a season, or I'm tired now. I'm just gonna take a season break. Like when you return, your podcast is not gonna be the same, because you really only have one. When you do a season, you really only have one at bat to really prove to people that your show is worth listening to. So unless people were absolutely hooked on your show before you go off on break, they're not going to pick your podcast up when you come back off break. Right. Because there's so many other things that take people's attention.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, because again, there are other podcasts that they can listen to, and then meanwhile you're on a break, they're finding another podcast and go, actually, I kind of like this one better anyway. So you know what I mean. So once you hook people and you create expectations, you have to be consistent. So you're saying that a weekly podcast is actually the best in terms of building that momentum, right?
Yeah, for the people who you like the target like area. For example, if you know that most of your listeners are in Jamaica, you want to make sure that by the time everybody's awake and checking their phones on Wednesday or whatever, your podcast is there and they're able to tune in to help. And also, like, when you think about consistency, you think about how someone is listening to your podcast, right? If I go on a run every morning and I go on a run on Christmas Day, I want your podcast to be there for my run on Christmas Day. Means that you gotta put out an episode on Christmas Day, because that's what you're really getting your people really used to that habit with your podcast. So like, I know people might, somebody's also is always saying, boy, I have to do weekly. There are ways you can batch it and everything, so you can make it easy for yourself. But consistency is absolutely key here, especially in terms of COVID. Somebody also mentioned about attention spans are short. In terms of COVID, people are being very selective with what they listen to. They either want to have stress relief, or they want to get some information into their systems. Real, good, positive information into their systems. If you're not producing at a certain quality or consistency, they're gonna reduce their number of podcasts, and your number is gonna be cut off the list. So consistency for many reasons.
And as Paul said, it doesn't mean you're recording a podcast every single week. Actually, no, you're batching your recordings, Susan. So you're batching the recording, and it's just the release date is every week. You're not recording every week, but it actually does mean you need to maintain a certain level of recording, which is why you need to schedule out your recording. So that's why I said, guys, there's a lot of steps in between recording getting the guests to agree because that in and of itself can be a headache because you're talking about schedules, which is why I think now is a good time to actually start a podcast because them die them yard
They're
or they
home.
have
Yes.
more time.
Big
But it's a
guests,
really
small
good
guests,
time.
they're at their home now.
Yeah, I know everybody is looking for a platform to go on as
Exactly.
another way of branding themselves or advertising themselves. So if you have a podcast idea, reach out to me or reach out to Paul and get it going now because people are now available and people are eager to talk about themselves and their businesses to other people because they're looking for avenues to promote and to brand. So now is a good time.
Yeah.
But guys, literally from setting up, and there's some legal issues behind the scenes because now you have to have a guest release and all sort of stuff. Listen, it's not easy, but you're batching your recording and you're just releasing, you're slow releasing, I call it. So every week you put out another episode. So it could be that you have episodes in the back. You're always having episodes in the back and you're releasing. So I do a queue method where I queue it based on date and sometimes based on topic because now that I'm doing a foodie series, I'm putting all the conversations I've had with people in the food space. So whether it's Chef Agent Mars, who is a YouTuber, or it is Jessica in the Kitchen, who I talked to. That episode is out. Go listen to it. She gave you all the skinny on being a business blogger. And then the next episode that was supposed to come out 2 weeks ago, that one that one is from the guy who he has another really good YouTube channel. So it really depends on what your style is. But then one thing, Paul, that you touched on that I really want to reiterate is the point that you mentioned about just left my head.
To what?
It just left my head.
Oh,
The point just literally
remember.
but never mind.
Yeah.
It will come back and I will mention it as we come back. But want to also talk to you, Paul, about the actual setup process itself, because another thing that adds to the likability and the comebackability of your podcast is the quality
Yeah.
of the production itself. And the good thing is that you don't have to be like, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing when I just started podcasting. I really didn't. YouTube really helps, but you find that the information that you get on like a YouTube and the information, hi Julian, and the information that you get elsewhere is not really related to us.
Mm-hmm.
And you find that a lot when you're talking about brand and brand building. There's a ton of information out there, but it's not related to Jamaicans or the Jamaican market or even the Jamaican experience. So you literally have to kind of translate a lot of it.
Yeah.
So what is your thoughts on actually producing a quality podcast using what you already have in train? How can you optimize what you already have to start? Because people sit down in a pod and they go, but I don't have this and I don't have that and I don't have this and they will talk themselves out of what they don't have instead of just starting. So how do you optimize what you would naturally already have to actually start putting out a somewhat decent podcast that you can then improve over time as you acquire equipment?
Yeah. So I have a controversial opinion on starting your podcast in relation to quality.
Okay.
And it's similar to like YouTube, right? Because if you look at YouTube right now, it's harder to break through as a successful YouTuber with a camera that you got from 2003, right? An old camera from 2003. It's harder. And I would agree it's the same thing for podcasting. Audio quality has been linked to respect and authority. If you have good audio quality,
Yes.
you are instantly more respected than someone who has very bad quality. There's no way around that. So if you're living in Jamaica right now, it might be expensive to source good microphones in Jamaica. I recommend Audio Fun on Dumfries Road. That's where I get my audio equipment.
Audio what?
Audio Fun. AUDIOPHON. They're very knowledgeable. That's where I get my microphones when I'm not bringing.
I got my mic from Music Mart.
What's that?
I got my mic from Music Mart.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think it's a good place as well. But audio funds were recommended to me by people, who teach at Karamak and stuff. So I went there and I got my microphones there, and those are really good. So those are going to be on the pricey end. Let me just type that in. Or do you got that? Audio fund, yeah. Those can be on the pricey end. What you could also do is bring in good microphones from Amazon. The ATR 2100 is really good quality for the price. It's like $60, $70. Also, this one here, this is similar to the ATR 2100. It's called a Samsung Q2U, similar price.
Yeah. Hold on, let me show you mine.
Yeah.
So this is mine, and I dropped it, so that's why I have a plastic because the thing is coming up here. But this is mine. It's a Samsung UC01 Pro. So I got this at Music Mart, and at the time I got it, it was $18,000, which I wanted to kick somebody in them face for because it is only $8 on Amazon.
Exactly. Yeah. So these are going
So
to be good.
I actually sourced it on Amazon, but if you're buying it out here, triple it and then add tax.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So this is my mic, and it is awesome.
Yeah. The first mic that I got was down here was for 20,000, and then the second mic that I got, so that I do my interviews face to face. So the first mic I got was for 20,000. The second mic I got was 30,000.
Oh wow!
And but yeah, and since that
That's you spent $30,000 on a mic?
Yeah.
Oh, Julian said Snowball. Julian, Snowball. I don't like Snowball.
Yeah, there are different kind of mics. They're like the condenser mics, which are more stereo quality, so they'll pick up everything unless you have a very pristine audio processed studio area. So not recommended for podcasting. But for things like these, which are cardioid mics, dynamic mics, where you speak into here, it gets it.
That's the front of the mic here,
and it doesn't pick up anything outside anywhere else.
Around the back. Yeah. Right. So that's what this one is. So when you plug it in, there's a light here. That thing turns green, and so you're supposed to talk in it like this. Hold it to the front, and it doesn't pick up anything.
Yeah.
Around here. So it only picks up what goes. It will pick up from the sides, but not at the back. And from the sides, it's lower than from the front.
Yeah. So that's what I recommend. And you don't need more than something like this, or like yours. When you just starting out, very inexpensive, will last you for years until you might need to upgrade to another level of audio quality, which you can get into the higher price.
Or like you're clumsy and you drop it and break it.
Well, honestly, break it. Yes. Yeah. If you get something like this or like ADR 2100, easy to replace because they're very inexpensive. So yeah. So yeah, audio quality is very important.
Right, and you also should look into getting a pop filter. Mm-hmm. Julian says thumbs up. Yeah, Julian. I mean, if the Snowball works for you, Snowball is Blue Yeti, right? If the Snowball works for you, then great. I think one of the reasons why I don't like it is because it's expensive and I can't afford it. But I did try it once, and I did not really see the difference between it and my mic. It's like it wasn't like, oh my god. This is a Samsung COU1 Pro. What was the name of yours, Paul?
Samsung Q2U.
You can show it again. You can show it again.
Oh.
Show your mic again.
Anybody see?
Yes. Okay.
It's Q.
So does it come with a stand?
Q2U. What you can see there.
Does it come with a stand?
Yeah, it comes with everything.
Paul? Okay. The stands are rubbish, by the way. Samsung stands are absolute rubbish, and that's why this fell, because it will buckle, and this is so heavy. This is like metal. It's heavy. So the thing just toppled. But you also need a pop filter because of what they call plosives. And plosives are the p and the b that happens when you talk. And the one thing about audio, remember that people are usually having headphones and it's in the ears. Imagine you going in somebody's ear. It's very jarring. So the more you can lessen that, and you can do that in post-production editing, it's a bitch to do it production.
Yes.
But what I did was I used Audacity and I created that filter in there. So I just click on the filter now and it automatically does it. But learning how to create that filter was a bitch. But anyway,
When it goes beyond a certain level, it's very it's
yeah,
almost impossible to fix. Like if the plosive is too
yeah,
loud, you just it's
yeah.
just you just
No
ruin it.
matter what you do,
So
it's still gonna have that. Yeah, it really does something to the ears, and I don't know why, but it really jars the ears.
yeah,
But a pop filter will help you minimize that. So a pop filter is that mesh thing that goes in front or on top, depending on where or yeah, it's usually in front of the mic,
yeah,
like so, and it's just a black filter thing, and it kind of lowers the explosives. And another thing that you can do to for stability, because another thing that affects podcast, Paul, and you can let me know if I'm on the right track here, is the level, the audio level. So if you have a pitch audio that goes up and down, up and down, up and down, that's also very hard to edit in post production to level it off. Um, Oh, come on, so she learn something every time kids speak. Hey, okay. So you want to avoid that in and out. So when there's a particular way you talk on the mic, Paul, to avoid the in and out, right?
yes.
Can you just pause?
Yeah, so there's a whole checklist of things that we go through with our clients to ensure that, like, because there are many things that, like, how far you hold the mic away from music and everything like that is important. Um, I don't remember the distance. I could tell you, but I don't
I
remember the,
said
the
five.
exact distance.
Was it 5 to 8 feet or something like
I
that
think
from
it's
your
like
mouth?
6 inches. I think I'm not sure.
Not 8 inches. Five,
If Alex, if
five
Alex,
to
Alex, know if you know what this is, Alex, please tell us in the chat because I don't remember.
Right, but guys, when you hire Paul, he'll tell you. So yes, Paul. So and guys, that's what I'm saying. It is so involved. There's a certain level that you need to hold the mic at. There's a certain point that you need to talk into the mic. It's a lot. And again, remember, it's in people's ears, so it has to have a particular tone and quality to it. So that's why when I get on the podcast, my tone changes. So I wouldn't be talking like this on the podcast. I'll like drop my tone just a little bit, soften it out just a little bit, go a little bit slower with my words, and then put on what I call my radio voice. The Digital Jamaica podcast with your host, Katie Francis. So you have to put on that. It's almost like a sing-songy kind of voice, because then remember, people not seeing you, so you can't come off as harsh or whatever. You have to have a pleasant tone to your voice, literally speaking, because it's in our people's ears. And if like me, your podcast is an hour long or can be like an hour long, who wants to listen to you for all long? If you're talking like this in a microphone for like 1 hour, ain't nobody do that. Right? And I've listened to Paul's podcast. It's very Mr. Rico Suave on the
That's the form of
podcast, right?
editing right
So
there.
you have to have a particular tone, right? Paul?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I suggest that. Like, I try to be myself when I speak. And that
Great.
usually, as you can hear, there are lots of, bits and pieces that are part of how I talk. For
Yeah.
the majority of those things, though, we edit them out. We just edit out all the bad part, because if and the rule that we have for editing, and editing is a whole different thing. The rule we have for editing is, if the speech issues impede with understanding what the content is about, we take it out. So if someone's trying to deliver a point, but you will lose a point, give up on the point if you did all the stutters and gaps and ums and ahs are in there, we cut them out.
Yeah. And what I try not to do is cut out too much of them, because it is a human
Exactly.
conversation.
Yeah.
And human conversation have pauses in them. So you're gonna hear yeah, okay, whatever. And the funny thing is, Google Assistant, that was one of the big things by Google Assistant. People was like, okay, this is weird as hell. When they were premiering their new Google Assistant, and they actually had Google Assistant call and make an appointment on your behalf, The reason why people believe that it was a real person they was talking to, because Google Assistant literally went, okay, let me check. So there was actually that
Yeah.
pause, and people did not know that they were talking to a robot. So there's a way that we talk as humans, and when Paul says remain as natural as possible, when I say change your tone, what I don't mean talk like somebody else, because that's not sustainable. What I mean is lower and talk a little bit slower, because I talk fast. So if I'm talking fast like this all the time, nobody's going to understand what I'm saying, and I'm not going to do this for an hour, because then who's going to want to listen to that? So you have to space out your words a little
Yeah.
bit
You
more,
have to be clear.
and a little bit more thoughtful in how it actually is coming across to the other person. There's so much, guys, that I have learned in the past, because I dropped my podcast in October 2018. There's so much I've learned in terms of quality, audio quality. That's the biggest thing, the audio quality. If the quality is good, you're already halfway there, right? You're already halfway there. Paul, the Successify thing, is it available for persons who were not able to make it, and how can they access it, and what's the cost?
Yeah, we're gonna make it evergreen. So we're working. I say, well, it was just a 5 day thing at that point, but we're retrofitting it and making it evergreen. So anybody who wants to join can join, and they'll get the 5 day challenge in their email. They'll still be able to participate and do all the challenges, but it won't be a live setting like we did with you.
Right, because it's already gone.
Yeah, because it's already gone. So we're gonna make it available.
Is there a cost attached to it?
No, there's no cost attached to it. No.
Okay, great. So when would that be available?
This week. So we already did a huge bits of the pieces for it. So this week it's gonna be fully available.
Okay. So Successify, Paul, just explain to them again what success, because at the end of Successify, you should have the confidence to do it. You should have your message honed and down pat. You should know who your target audience is. You should know how you need to go about attracting these people. So it was really like it was short, but it was intense, and you really got you really got a lot out of it. I remember the part where I was on and you were talking about, that's the part, the flag planting statement, where you're saying, how do you get them from purgatory to paradise? That is what really stuck with me, because it is literally a proposition kind of thing. It's like, if you listen to me, I will help you do this, that, and that. I will get you from where you are to the place where you actually want to be. So guys, it was really, really good. So as of the end of this week, maybe early next week, just keep following Paul's page.
Yeah, I'll post it.
And you will, when it becomes available, guys, you really, really need it. This is the time. Any business idea you have, now it's a good time to test it, which means that you actually have to start doing it.
Yeah.
So Paul, can you tell us about some of the services that you offer? And how people can get in touch with you in that regard?
Yeah, Instagram is where we can talk, where you can find me. If you have any questions, we're on Instagram. It's always, Paul Stennett Live. That's where I am. Just send me a DM. So if you have a podcast, we can help you to produce your podcast, create really great content, get it out to your audience. All you really have to do is to give us the audio, your raw audio, and we'll take care of the rest. We can really make it sound really good, make it really interesting in terms of show notes, everything, and publish it for you, so you don't have to worry about that. Also,
and guys, if you think you can do your own show notes, I dare you. I double dare you to do your own show notes, and then come tell me how cool that was. Yeah. Well, because imagine doing show notes for an hour-long show. That's a lot of words, I can assure you.
Yep.
You need professional services for that. Right. Sure. And you also what, Paul?
Yeah, so we also do coaching. So if you want to launch your podcast, and you wanna, so there's you can jump into the challenge, take the challenge, learn about how to make your podcast more successful. If you want more help with it, actually walking you through over 8 weeks now to launch, that's a service that we offer as well. And what we're coming out with in the next few weeks is for podcasters who, like I said, have a failing podcast and they want to turn it around to actually having a 6-figure podcast funnel. We're building a product around that, So I guess you're hearing about it here first. So yeah, next few weeks we'll talk more about that.
All right, we're running out of time. Thank you so much, Paul. Guys, visit his page at Paul Stennett Live. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, DM, and I'll see you next week. Bye.
Okay.